So far, we are making some good progress with our app. We were able to navigate from screen to screen. Let me just enter the correct credentials. TD user. Okay. So as you can see, this is how our app looks like so far. I'm just going to disable the login part just so that we don't get an annoying prompt to log in each time we run our app. To disable this login part, all I'm going to do is make the app progress to the next screen regardless of whether the password is correct or not. So in this case, I'm going to move this here outside this if statement or this if block. And also, I don't necessarily need to pass data onto the next screen. So I'm just going to remove this extra, and I'll do the same in here. So I'm going to remove this right here, and that would mean I can also remove this. Okay, so let's just run our app just to see how it looks like so far. Hopefully there are no errors. Okay, so I'm just going to hit sign in. Okay, and it signs in regardless, and this is gone. So now let's try to actually populate this section over here with some items. If you look at our to-do list here, we have some items that are going to be populated here. But right now, this looks pretty much empty. And in order to populate or add some items to our list, we have to have an understanding of how this recycler view works. So one thing we can do is just go onto Google and then try to find the solution to that. And let's just see the Android official example here. So in here, there's a long document that you can read to understand how the recycler view works. And we even have an example here. But let me show you a much easier way of doing this. My goal here is to teach you the most efficient ways to develop apps. And as long as you have some good knowledge of Java, you should be able to develop any Android app you want. So recycler views are probably one of the most complex things to work with inside our palette here. So I'm going to show you how to tackle complex code, especially if you're a beginner with Android. Once you get to know the method that I use nowadays to develop some complex code, writing any type of Android code should be so much easier for you. And you may already have an idea of what I'm going to talk about, and it's AI. With the help of AI, we can quickly create any type of app that we want. What might have taken us a few days to develop in the past could take us now just a few hours to develop. So let me show you an example. My AI helper of choice, the one I'm going to be using, is Chat GPT. Okay, so if you don't already have a Chat GPT account, I highly recommend that you get one now, because we're going to be using that moving forward. So what I'm going to do is just log into my account. Okay, so now let's think about what we want this chatbot to help us create. Okay, we want it to basically be able to figure out how to use this list item with our recycler view. Okay, so I'm just going to talk to my chatbot here. So essentially what I'm going to do is provide it with the code that I already have, and I'm going to say, given the following recycler view item layout file, which is going to be this file over here. How can I use the recycler view to populate a list? So with any chatbot, the more descriptive you are in your questions, the better the responses it can provide, okay? So I'm going to give it some additional information. Okay, so the additional information I provided is that I want to be able to dynamically set the checkboxes text, which is this text right here, and the text views text, which is the following one right here. So these two items. And I'm going to do that using a pair of strings. Let's see the response we get. Okay, so let's go through this response. So to use a recycler view to populate a list with dynamically changing text for the checkbox and text view, you'll need to do the following steps. So it's telling us everything step by step, which I love. So first, we're going to have to create the recycler view item, the layout file, and it should include the checkbox and text view. So it should look something like this. So as you can see, we already have this file here. If we look at the code for this file, we already have the checkbox part and we also have the text view part. So this part we've already completed. So the next part is to create a recycler view adapter. And this will be responsible for binding the data to the recycler view item layout. So what I'm going to do is just copy this code over here, and I'm going to create a class called my adapter. So I'm just going to create a new Java class in here, and the name is my adapter. And going back to my chatbot, I'm just making sure the class name is the same, which it is. I've already copied the code, so I'm just going to go ahead and paste the code in here, making sure that this package line exists. So you see a lot of red here because we need to import all of these classes. So I can manually try to import each and every one of these red highlighted classes, or I can just try to get my chatbot to do that for me. So what I'm going to put as my next prompt is add the necessary import statement. And I also wanted to add some comments to the code, because right now I don't know exactly what each part of this code is supposed to do. So I'm just going to ask it to add some comments. Okay, so perfect. Now we have the import statements already added with some comments as well. So I'm going to copy this code now and paste it in here. And remember not to paste it over this package because it's essential. So I'm just going to highlight everything below that and then hit paste. Okay, so as you can see, it's not perfect because it forgot one import statement, which is this pair right here. So I'm going to import that class. And for this one right here, the item layout, it is the name of our list item layout. Okay, so in this case, it's incomplete list item. Since the chatbot doesn't know the names of our files, it just used the default name. So I'm just going to update this to the correct one. Okay, and I'll do the same for the ID for our checkbox and our text view. Okay, so I'm going to go into my incomplete list item, figure out the ID. So since this is a code view, you can see the IDs here, or you can even see it in our design view as well, like this, right here. So I'll leave the first ID as is, but the second ID, I'll just change this to category. So text view category. Okay, so now coming back to this, I can update that here. And I think this checkbox is already exists. So let me just click it. Oh, okay, it's just a capital B over here. So I'll make this checkbox with a capital B. And now my adapter code is ready. Let's see what else we need to do. So we also need to update our activity, and we need to add this code in there. So let's take a look at what our activity looks like right now. Our activity is actually called to-do list activity. And what we need to do is put that additional code in here inside our onCreate method. So since I don't want to overwrite this whole entire file, I already have some code in here. I'm just going to copy the specific part of the code that we need. So everything from here onwards, place it here. And I'm just going to import this class manually. And this as well. We've already done this step over here. So I think we are ready. So let's keep our fingers crossed. So let's run our app and see if it actually works as intended. Perfect. So as you can see here, thanks to our comments, we know that this part is where we're creating our data list, and whatever we put here in the first part of our pair of strings is going to be the title, and then whatever we put here is going to be the category. Okay, so let's add a few more items to our data list. So let's rerun this and see how it looks. So now, as you can see, with the power of AI, we're able to quickly create this functionality over here. And if we were to do this manually, we would either have to already know how recycler views work, or probably go on the internet and look through documentation like this that can get very complicated. And like I mentioned, my objective here is to show you the most efficient ways to create apps. And currently, using AI is probably the most efficient way. Okay, so let's add one more functionality here. So what we want to do is when the user checks an item, we want to remove it from this list, because checking an item indicates that it is no longer incomplete, but now it's completed. So let's see if our AI helper can help us here. So like I mentioned before, you have to be very specific with exactly what you want. So I'm going to let this bot know what I'm looking for. Okay, so I want to be able to detect when a checkbox is checked and remove that list item from the data. Okay, so let's see if we can find the code for that. Okay, so as you can see here in our response, it's asking us to modify our my adapter class to something like this, and also to modify our my view holder class. But in this case, we don't actually have a my view holder class. So if we don't like the response that our chatbot has provided to us, we can regenerate a response. This looks a little bit better. To perform what we're trying to do, this is an updated version of the code. So we're just going to replace our my adapter class with this information over here. And then our activity, we're going to also update it with the information here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and copy this code go to my adapter, and I can replace the whole entire thing. I may have to update these things again, but that's fine. So like I mentioned, make sure the package part is still there. So I'm just going to highlight everything aside from that and update this. Okay, let's add our imports one more time. And then this is my incomplete list item checkbox with a B, capital B. And this was the text view for category. There we go. Okay, so going back to our response here, we need to also copy, but I believe this is the only part that has been added. Nope, it looks like we have some more additions. Okay, so I've successfully merged the changes with my original code. So basically, if the checkbox is checked, this is going to execute, which is going to basically remove the item from our list. So let me run my code one more time and see if it's actually working as intended. Beautiful. See, I love it when AI is working as it's supposed to work. Even though we're removing items from our, oops, it looks like our program crashed. Let me see if there's a reason why. Okay, I think I know why. Just based on experience, I know that I'm supposed to use the holder.get position. So now if I rerun my app, hopefully it's not going to crash this time around. So let's see if we can remove objects. Okay, so as you can see, there are no bugs. Everything's working as intended. Perfect. So I just know this based on experience, but if your application at any point is throwing errors or you're having any issues with your application, you can always return back to the chatbot and explain the error, and it's going to point out or what part of your code you need to fix. So now as I remove the items from my incomplete list, I want it to appear here in my completed. That means we have to also create a similar recycler view here where we are able to add items to this list as well. So what I'm going to do here is create another adapter, because each recycler view requires its own adapter. So I'm just going to copy this since the functionality is somewhat the same, and I'm going to name it completed. So instead of this incomplete list item here, it has to be completed list item. There we go. And here we're going to need to update these IDs, because if we look inside our completed list item, we only have one item here, which is checkbox 2. So in that case, this will have to become checkbox 2, and we don't have that secondary item, which is the category. So I'm going to remove this from here. But now once I remove it, I have to make sure I remove any reference to that, which is also specified here and also here. As a matter of fact, since this is not going to be a pair of strings, instead of using the pair data type, I'm just going to use a string only. So keep in mind that you can generate all of this code using the chatbot, but I'm choosing to do this manually. So everywhere I see pair, I'm just going to modify it to string. Okay, I think that is all. I don't see any red underlines. And also for now, we don't want to have the completed section react to any type of clicks. It's only the incomplete section that when we click the checkbox, we want it to have some type of reaction. So I'm going to remove this item click listener from here. And as you can see, I have some red text. So I'm just going to remove anything that has that red text. As a matter of fact, I can remove all of this as well. So this is a listener for the checkbox changes. And I'm going to remove this as well. After removing everything to do with the clicking, I'm left with this code. And keep in mind that if you want to leave the reaction to clicking, you can also do that. It's entirely up to you. Maybe when a user clicks a completed item, you want it to vanish from this completed list as well. It's completely up to you. But for me, I don't think it's necessary, so I'm just removing anything in my code that has to do with listening to clicks. Okay, so this is done. Now I'm going to go to my main to-do list activity over here. And for each and every single thing that has to do with my first recycler view, I'm going to copy the same thing for my second one. So here, I'm going to make another recycler view called recycler view 2. And I'll make this adapter 2. I mean, you can think of a more clever name, but for me, I'm just going to make everything have 2 added to the end. This will also have 2. And remember, we changed this from a pair to just a string. So I'm just going to remove this from here. So we basically made a duplicate of each and every single one of these lines of code that is related to our first recycler view so that we can support our second recycler view. So now let's run our code. And there we go. Now at least we can get our completed list over here to be populated based on our information here. But what we truly want to do is to remove the item from this data list and place it into this new data list over here. So what I'm going to do here is just remove all the information here just to keep the data list or the second data list empty. And instead, right before I remove the item from our first data list, as you can see here, this is where we remove the item from our list. I'm going to place that item into the second data list. Okay, so to get the item, I'm going to use this position variable that is provided to get the position of that item inside our data list. And now that I have the item, I'm going to append it to our second data list. And don't forget, we're only adding the information here and not the category information. So I'll just use this dot first. And then finally, I'm going to have to let my second recycler view know that I have made some changes to the second data list. Okay, so I'm going to do my adapter 2 dot notify data sets changed. So it's just essentially going to refresh this completed list to reflect whatever the new changes are. Okay, so let me rerun our app and see how this works. Okay, so I just finished cleaning the kitchen. Perfect. So when I check it, it comes into my completed items. And let's say I just paid the water bill as well. As you can see, it also gets moved. So everything is coming together very well. So the main objective that I tried to achieve here in this part is just to let you know that we have AI tools available to us so we don't have to know how each and everything works in Android. And it also saves time so that we don't need to read through a lot of complicated documentation to know how to use some of Android's features. For example, here, only the parts that I need for my specific code was provided to me. And I also have some additional comments in here, which lets me know what each part of this AI generated code is supposed to do.